Justin.
Justin and Patrick Peg. That's no Peg. Lance Peterson Peg. Rick Ellis Peg RTA.
Ronnie Lawson, Peg.
Adam Ledford Peg.
Jeremy Moore, ADOT. Who's Tom Morva?
Heidi Lasham, Town of Marana.
Natalie Shep, Pima County Environmental Quality.
Sam Credio, City of Tucson.
Rodriguez, Peg.
Right, and let's go online. We will start with Dan Grossman,
Dan Grossman, Town of Marana.
Chris Steeb.
Stevie at the University of Arizona.
Thanks, Chris. David Zinda,
David Zinda, Peg.
Davida,
Davida Mueller, Centran.
Galavale,
Nalo Tamasarita.
Jason,
Jason James with ADOT.
Josue,
Hey, good morning, everybody. Josue, City of South Tucson.
thanks, Josue. Paul,
Paul Burton, Town of Saladita.
thank you, Paul. And is there a second page here? Is that everybody? Misa,
Misa Hannah was ADOT.
thank you, Misa. And Robin,
Robin Green, City of Tucson.
thank you, Robin. Was there anybody else online that I didn't call? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to item 2, in-kind reporting. Jeanette Duran.
Thanks. Regional planning efforts are enhanced by recording time donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. PAG collects data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities to apply for use as matching funds for grants and federal dollars. If you're paid with federal dollars, please let us know. Time spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated by PAG staff who are knowledgeable of the agenda and meeting material. At the conclusion of the meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent in this meeting. Time spent working on PAG RTA initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jeanette. Let's move on to item 3, approval of the July 17, 2024 meeting summary. Have you all had a chance to review the meeting summary, and do you have any comments or questions? All right, hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Next, we'll move on to item 4, review and recommend approval of the fiscal year 2022 to fiscal year 2026 PAG Transportation Improvement Program TIP Amendment number 2022.120. Jamie and Adam's at the podium. There you go, Adam, take it away.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Amendment 22.120 adjusts FTA 5307 apportionment funding for 2 City of Tucson transit projects in fiscal year 2023. I'll offer a quick apology. The packet memo for this item incorrectly lists TIP ID 471.11 instead of 471.00. But fortunately, the draft amendment in your packet does contain the correct ID. Pending this body's recommendation for approval, we'll get that fixed before we move on to a management committee. So item A moves roughly 4.2 million from TIP ID 471.00 bus replacements to TIP ID 27.03 Sun van replacement vans, and also programs the 262,000 of additional FTA 5307 remaining from that year's apportionment to TIP ID 2703. This amendment is administrative in nature, is that it just addresses some funding shifts as other funding sources became available, but due to the amount of the programming policy dictates that it goes through the formal amendment process. This amendment was recommended for approval by the Transit Working Group by unanimous vote in late July. I'll answer any questions that you might have.
Questions for Adam? All right, this is an action item, so is there a motion to approve the amendment?
Motion to approve.
All right, so motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, any discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Before we move to item 5, I know that some folks have some time constraints, so I'm going to ask that we move items 7 through 10 up in the agenda. So I'd like to move to item 7, which is the 2055 Regional Mobility and Accessibility Plan RMAP update with Jeanette and
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the TPC. So you'll see the next 4 agenda items pertain to the RMAP. So we'll give you a little bit of an update on where we are and then talk through some of the action items, but trying to just in the order that they show up there. We are on the home stretch here with the project list. Wanted to say thank you to all of you for meeting with us one-on-one. Some of you one-on-one several times. And we appreciate your timely responses and also to your staff who played an important part in getting it to that point. Before we dive too far into the project list, we're going to go ahead and get started with Melanie Lawson, who's going to give us a little bit of an update on the survey results. So Melanie is here at the podium.
Good morning. Thank you for your time today to learn about the results of the recent long-range transportation survey. This is very raw data at this point. We're still doing some additional analysis. Share the results. So we did have just shy of 4,500 survey participants. As a reminder, the survey was open for 6 weeks. It launched in early June on June 8th and closed on July 18th. The survey was available in both English and Spanish, and we also worked with the vendor to create an accessible version that worked with screen reading devices. And the survey was available in web and mobile friendly versions. Many users opted to complete the survey on the web platform, about 80%, and about 20% did complete it on their mobile devices. So this is a quick reminder of the public outreach that we did to promote the survey. So there was both paid and non-paid multimedia campaign, which included English and Spanish radio, print TV, digital ads, and digital kiosks. We also had a news release that was sent to local media, and the survey was promoted in 7 articles and also on a news interview. We also used community-based organizations, local businesses, and many of your government offices to help promote the survey. A variety of organizations were targeted, such as the Chambers of Commerce, local nonprofit groups, neighborhood groups and associations. And then we also promoted the survey at in-person events. We were able to reach over 300 people, and those events were targeting low-income, minority, senior, and limited English-speaking populations. So now we'll get into some of the results. So first, we'll review the results of the transportation priorities question. So the most popular transportation priority among survey participants was to improve roadway conditions. This same topic was also the most popular second priority and the most common third priority as well. So the second most common top priority was reduced crosstown travel time. Third was road and intersection safety, followed by reducing traffic congestion. The least common top priority was improve access to jobs. So to make it just another way to represent the data, this chart shows the overall priority ranking. So this gave each response a weighting, whether it was first, second, or third, to provide an overall ranking for the 9 options. So as previously shown, improving roadway conditions is far and away the top priority. And this bar chart also shows, that was the most popular second and third choice as well. And the second, third, and fourth priorities were all pretty close. So you'll see that road and intersection safety is just barely ahead of reducing traffic congestion, and both are closely followed by reducing across-town travel time. Moving on to the regional budget, this was the question where users could apply dollar amounts in $1 and $10 increments up to $100 among the different areas. So similar to the previous question, where participants want to prioritize spending is on improving existing roads, followed by safety improvements, and then reducing congestion. Here are results for travel patterns. The goal was of this question was to measure the different ways that people travel through the region. So 3,295 participants selected automobile as the mode that they most often use to travel, followed by bicycle with 234. We asked a similar question, or I'm sorry, this is the same question, but for transit use. So of the participants who answered this question, 2,441 said that they rarely or never use transit. 315 said that they use transit daily. We also asked about vehicle ownership. The most popular answer we received was 2 vehicles per household, but you'll see there was a good distribution there. There was also a question about electric vehicle ownership. The most popular answer was 0. This next slide summarizes 2 questions in the RMAP survey. First, we asked survey participants to indicate how many days of the week they telework or work remotely. So you'll see the majority, 54%, indicated 0 days of telework. We also asked survey participants to indicate how many days of the week they carpool. Because these percentages were really small, it's just summarized here on a table. So nearly 90% of survey participants indicated 0 days of carpooling per week. And then last, we have demographic questions. These were at the end of the survey and again, were optional. So not every survey participant chose to respond to these questions. But the demographic information is useful and will help us inform our next phase of outreach. So we're planning some targeted outreach and focus groups once the project list is final. So we can target some groups and demographics that were maybe underrepresented a little bit in this survey. So for example, we can plan to target some Hispanic organizations, some student groups, and other groups to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to provide feedback. Those are all the slides I have. We can take questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
I have some questions. Thank you, Chair. So I know on one of the first slides, you said that this survey is going to be used to inform the project list, but then we're also saying it's fairly raw data. It doesn't represent a lot of the demographics of our community. So I'm just curious, how are we using these results to inform the project list?
Thank you for that question. I'll let Hannah or Jeanette.
Yeah. Thank you, Melanie. Yeah, so we did use some of these raw data results to discuss categorical spending with you guys, as well as to make some recommendations on where we might want to include a little more funding on different categoricals. So that's pretty much where it started. And really the next piece is going to be to, like Melanie said, look at some of those groups that we didn't see some participation in and take the plan to them and make sure that their needs are covered and at least that they understand what's going on, and making sure that we have their feedback on the project list, but on the plan as a total. So there were some, recommendations based on this. And then, like I said, it will continue when we just decide who to do our more targeted outreach with.
So might be jumping ahead. Would it be premature for us to be taking any action on a project list today if we're still seeking more input that's going to inform our list?
I don't think so. I think we got 4,500 people to respond. The hard part is that not everybody self-identified. So there are about a third of the survey participants that we don't really know what group they fall into. So I think that, overall, we've gotten more participation on this survey than in any survey that we have results for on pretty much any of our plans. So I think that we did cover a lot of folks, but it just is an effort to make sure that we do hear from some of those that we might not have. We are going to do that more targeted. But really we see that it's going to be more of an educational piece and just also a verification of, are their needs being met? Are there projects in their communities? What types of things are they looking for? So I think given the nature of our project list as well, there's a lot of broad categories in there. I think we've got it covered, but it'll help us to go out there and really make sure that everybody's included.
Just to follow up, I do have some real concerns with us locking something down when it sounds like we haven't heard from it, and that, improving existing roads was far and away the biggest, the biggest priority for the set that did contribute to this. And I don't know that it's as representative in the list of projects. So I'm hesitant in feeling like we really applied what the public said in any meaningful way here.
Let me, if I could just follow up on what you said, Jeanette. So we will take the project list out to the public. We haven't yet, right? They were just generally responding on what their priorities were for the region. So will we apply some of those lessons learned and make sure that we can reach folks that typically their voices aren't heard when it comes time to actually them seeing the project list? We can get that more direct feedback on, does that impact their community the way they want to see it?
Yeah, and that's kind of the analysis that Melanie's been working on to make sure that we figure out exactly the best way to get in touch with those folks.
Okay.
We did take the survey out to some very specific groups when we were in that 6-week window. Specifically, we met with some groups with Pima Council on Aging. We went to a couple food banks and really tried to make sure that we at least provided the opportunity for folks to take the survey, but also just to talk to us. And we did take down a lot of feedback, just direct feedback from people having conversations with us, as well as talking to the people that organize those events who are really hands-on with those specific communities. But we do know some other groups that we're going to be reaching out to with the whole plan. So.
And what, if we find that there's gaps in the plan after some of those more targeted conversations, what's the plan or what's the mechanism to make changes to address those needs?
Yeah, we can make those decisions as the time comes. I hesitate to say we'll make actual named project changes because those are pretty solidified and we hope to move forward with those for modeling purposes. But in those categorical spending areas, we can adjust the dollars for sure. Or if we need to take one of those categorical projects and expand it to include something that maybe we haven't thought of yet, we can do that as well. So.
Okay, I appreciate that. Heidi and then Natalie.
Just a question. I know that you had said, Jeanette, that there's about a third of people that didn't identify. So how do you figure out who's not represented on this? A third, that's a pretty big percentage.
It is, yeah.
So how do you figure out who to target and who's not represented here?
Exactly. So a couple ways. One, we did collect zip code data. So we do know some areas of town, perhaps that, folks just from that part of town didn't respond. So that's going to be one piece of it. We did do some targeted outreach to different zip codes during the survey. Like as we saw parts of town were not participating. I know we did a targeted event in Saurita for that reason. So we're going to do that. And then also like with the age group, we noticed that we didn't get a lot of folks like under 20. So, our younger users of the system. So given the time of year that we have the survey, those who typically engage in these sort of civic things, so that'll be another group that that Melanie reaches out to, and we try to get some feedback specifically from them. So any of those categories where we see like there's some folks we should probably see if we can reach out to some of those folks more directly, we'll do that. So that'll be like where we start, just with those. But yeah, it's hard because the third that didn't respond, who are they? We can anticipate they're probably very similar distribution to those who did respond. But at the end of the day, 4,500 responses is really good. And we're really happy with the turnout. And I think we're really happy with the events that we did go to and the folks that we did speak with. I know Melanie kind of mentioned it quickly, but we did do an adaptive version for visually impaired folks, and we worked pretty closely with our vendor on the survey as well as those individuals to make sure that they had access to the survey. So that was good to know that direct outreach was there. Those folks knew about it and were able to participate. So I'm really making sure that folks that might not have seen me on KGUN or read about us in the Sentinel or in the Star or saw our social media outreach, that they were also identified and we reached out directly to them. So I think that's part of the reason we got such a good turnout.
Yeah, if I can add to, so that, I'm trying to go to that slide, but we're looking at the census data and then the percentages to see if the response that we received matches up with sort of the demographic for the area.
Natalie?
So I have a couple comments. One, you already addressed to some extent. I think it's going to be really important to try to get, I mean, we're talking about a long range plan, so young people are the ones that will be most impacted by our decisions here. So I think it's going to be important to really try to get their input, and that is often in untraditional ways. Or meeting them in the day, FEMA community college, those kinds of things, I think are going to be, because your numbers for young people are really, really low.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and again, I'm not involved heavily in the project selection process because of my role, but I don't understand where improving existing roads, by far the biggest feedback you got was what was important, how that's included in projects.
Sure, that's a good question. Thanks, Natalie. And when Hannah goes over the project list a little later in the presentation, we can identify that specifically. We did create a categorical for roadway reconstruction specifically. We could also go back and look at just all the individual projects themselves. Many of those are maintenance and modernization projects, which are just complete reconstruction projects. I know many that came from, for instance, City of Tucson. Those projects are, they're going to address just that. They're going to improve existing conditions. They're not necessarily widening projects or capacity building projects. So there's elements of that that are going to be covered in just those named projects, but also in that newly created roadway reconstruction category. We also have another category that was specific to transit, which came in to say that they are wanting specific improvements to connecting transit stops to the roads and to the sidewalks and bikeways. And so I'm just sort of thinking outside the box of not just getting people on the transit, but once they get off, where are they going? How are they getting to where they need to be? So including making some of those facilities either exist where they don't exist, or to reconstruct and build better connectivity between the different modes. So that's a new project that you'll see in the list as well.
One last thing, I would just say, I concur with Catherine, that it does seem to be premature that we're kind of going about this in some simultaneous way. And it seems a little bit disingenuous that we are going through the process of collecting this information and then simultaneously in the same meeting, we are presented with results and being asked to approve the list. It seems a little out of whack. So I think it makes more sense to hold off until we have more information to actually move forward. But just my 2 cents.
Thanks, Natalie. Other questions, comments?
I was, in some ways, this feels more like an advanced public comment period rather than a public input or, to inform it, because it did come so late in the game. And so, I'm glad we're going to reach out and see what we can do. I think we should be open in that public comment period, because eventually this will go to public comment, that some of these name projects may have to change. Some of the, multiple, the pots of money for these roadway improvements or transit improvements, they may need to grow in order to reflect things. And so I'm hoping that should we take action later today, that doesn't prevent us from making additional changes when we get more information from the public. I would also say, school districts, they're all back in school. They have email lists like 25 times a day. If the survey went out to all the parents that get their TUSC and whatever school district mailers, we might get big hits. I don't know that they were distributed that way. And it's also an opportunity for all the students to, provide feedback potentially.
Yeah, if I could just add, the City of Tucson has done a lot of work in regards to data analysis around equity. And we know the areas of the City of Tucson that have experienced historic disinvestment and are transportation vulnerable. So we can certainly work with the PAG staff to help share that data to the public. You can actually access it online, to make sure that we're targeting those areas where we know likely their voices aren't being heard, and over the last probably 50 years, even longer, haven't received that investment in the transportation system. So we're ready to help with that.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah. I also wanted to mentioned as well, and working with the different jurisdictions, a lot of conversations happened around, where did your projects come from, right? Like, we know a lot of the city of Tucson projects came from their Move Tucson effort, which, was a very intensive public outreach process and working with their community to come up with their list. Miranda just completed a very similar exercise with their transportation master plan. So those projects were vetted through their communities pretty heavily. Nice write-up just recently on the Miranda one. So knowing that we are pulling together a region-wide list, we're very comfortable with the projects that you all provided to us, knowing that those all went through a process at your jurisdiction level to end up on our plate as part of this discussion. So we know that a lot of more localized needs are being met through those projects that were submitted, and as well as a lot of the regional projects. ADOT's process is also very similar to get to their project lists. Those things are vetted at a different level, but they all land on the big list the same way. So we're pretty comfortable that it really does reflect what you guys are looking for.
So with that, is there any more on the update item, or do we want to get into the project list item? It's kind of seems like
We
we're
have
starting to shift
a couple other
updates.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, if that's everything with the survey, I don't want to.
Any other questions on the survey?
Just wanted to underscore the point that Catherine made. I think there's a distinct difference between public input and public comment. And I think we're in the public comment period. I think there may have been an opportunity missed to kind of connect with the public, get their input on, the overall long-range plan goals, what the priorities are, how that might impact performance measures. And I mean, late in the game, we're hearing what we thought we knew, which was fix the roads. And yet when we turn to the content in the current draft pieces of the plan, we see I find difficulty being able to point to the public, well, it's there, it's right there, because the old approach of putting a good portion of the local revenues to pavement maintenance to show there's investment in roadway conditions is being changed. And so I have concerns about being able to connect the public with, we're listening to you and making changes in the plan, especially hearing that there's hesitation to say that we're going to make any changes to the name project list. So I guess I'm wondering why that approach wasn't taken similar to the way it was taken like 10 years ago, where the input was sought at the beginning of the plan to help us establish the goals for the long range plan and help us figure out what's important to the community and then align the project list with that. We seem to be working from that old work that was done, assuming that it's still fresh and relevant, yet it was done 10 years ago. And so it gives me a little bit of concern that we may have missed an opportunity here. I'm hopeful we can follow on with the additional outreach and reconcile what we're hearing from the public and demonstrate that it is indeed in the plan, but I'm having difficulty pulling that piece out and being able to say with confidence, it's there, it's right there. We're investing in the things that you're telling us are important to you. Well,
Jamie?
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Chair, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Jeanette, but my understanding is that RTA Next, of course, we know that our committees have been working for years on that. And it was anticipated that RTA Next was actually gonna have a robust public involvement period before this time. And my understanding was that we were trying to avoid mixing those public input processes with the RMAP. So I hear these points, but I think we should recognize that this process has been impacted by the RTA Next process. And so instead of, I think we've talked about surveys for a while, but we've been on hold. Is that correct, Jeanette?
That's correct. Yeah.
Thanks, Jamie. I appreciate that. And, public outreach is not perfect. It's you do the best you can. You always want to get more input throughout these projects or plans. And then you do a project and someone says, I didn't get a chance to provide feedback. You do the best you can. I think what I'm hearing is that, we maybe see some opportunities to target some areas that need to provide some additional feedback. And through this process, we just have a mechanism to fold that into the work that we're doing. I think that would at least give me a level of comfort that this ultimate plan will reflect the needs of the community. So that's just my 2 cents. You said you had other items you wanted to update?
Yeah, just a couple other quick updates before we get really into the list. Dr. No has a couple comments on where we stand with the modeling process.
Morning, Mr. Chair and members of TPC. And so for on that, the modeling update in first the data collection, the data science team has collected 2 groups of data, one for land use model, the other for travel demand model, which is also known as active race model. For land use model, collected, adopted, and all just information, just the land use side and the known project, other development, the plans, with the jurisdictional partners. Through the meetings with the jurisdictions, we have collected latest information and data, and the collected data has been discussed at the public meetings as well. And I think there was a request and from PAC, I think Jeanette sent out the email and for transit improvement project BRT, the project connecting transit centers to airports. Regarding that, we've been waiting for if there's any and the land user related data or just some information so we can utilize in our just a land use model update. As I remember, the due was set to the end of August. So after just having all of the project list update here, then we have to just kick off our just the model and the network update. And then that's actually too late to just correct our just land use model inputs because of that will be used just continuously and every 5 to 10 year increments. Third, travel demand model, and we have collected in the TAG or just MAG microanalysis zone data, typically called in the demand data and including population, household, and employment inputs aggregated in TAG and MAG. And we are also waiting for again, just a project list to demonstrate our supply side and to show the impact of the transportation system improvement through this on-map project list. For second model test and language model, we've tested a newly developed module and enhanced the existing employment allocation module with the new constraints and to represent jurisdictions job growth balanced well. And for a travel demand model, we've tested PEG AVM using just to develop the base year input data, especially for a QA/QC check, and if the outputs make sense or not. And some additional tests were being developed in the tested to support this in the 2055 RMF. This update will be discussed at the public meeting next Wednesday, August 28th. For the project timeline, once the project list ready, we're going to just build our just a forecast year networks accordingly, and we hope to test the successive language model, travel demand model tests, and with each 5 to 10 year increment. So then update the proposed measures. Hopefully this is taking around 24 months. I'm sure just the Jeanette will talk about the project timeline, and but that's the overall estimation we have. And then just the Title VI equity and the air quality comparameter analysis will be conducted. And the intermediate and just the draft final outputs will be discussed at PopTech and our working group meetings, and hopefully here at TPC if you need it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions?
You said something really that caught my ear, which was you're going to be stepping through some of the modeling work and then updating performance measures. Is that essentially what you're going to do? And so as I was looking at some of the performance measures, the jobs reachable and those types of metrics kind of caught my eye, like how frequently we look at those and should they be adjusted. So I'm not sure if we've got the cart before the horse in terms of all of the performance measures that we're going to be talking about later today, and whether there's still going to be changes coming as a result of the modeling work to make sure that some of those metrics are dialed in the right way and not just a carryover from the old content. Can you speak to that? I'm not sure if I'm following properly or if that's the right procedure.
Yeah, for performance measures, I think just two different performance measures. And for target setup, that's actually just independent and just the modeling side. And we are trying to just focus on just the easiest thing. I think you know well about just the accessibility and within certain just the time boundary. Or just travel time index update. And there are some just the components is just related to how to just the performance measure target. But we are typically kind of just used in our own, like it's just a listed and the 16 and plus just the air quality model, just the output and those and already just available and earlier just the 2045 RMAP update. That's going to be just used and plus just additional because of we are using just the activity-based model. We have to use some just additional benefit and looking in just additional detail and about the social economic side and the income level, just age group level. We can just address some additional performance measures.
So it sounds like your performance measures are more relevant to how you would like and expect the model to perform. But they do seem to have some connection to the performance measures that we're talking about for the overall plan. And I guess I want to make sure that we don't approve something that's going to have a different look to it, whether it be jobs accessible within 30 minutes or, severely congested roadway conditions or whatever the outputs from the model might feed into this.
Yeah.
And not be able to change that, I guess.
Yeah, here just the performance measures is more likely just the impact analysis, sort of like after we have just a project list together with our just projection, population, and employment. So how we can just address those and the impact at the point to 2055 the year.
Ellie?
So you mentioned the conformity determination. Obviously, that's a component of this, but at this moment, we're still waiting on final approval of the TIP because of issues that are going on with EPA. Can you describe how that might impact the conformity determination for this as well?
Yeah, I think that's just not just a listed and the formal just modeling side, maybe just Dustin Fitzpatrick can just step up because he's actually leading the discussion. Is that okay? Or just you think just, I don't know. Yeah. Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So regarding the air quality conformity for the TIP, the discussions are finalizing with FHWA and EPA for the approach for that determination. And once that's decided upon, that will be applied to the 2055 RMAP conformity analysis.
Have they given you a time frame, and do we know even when the TIP will be approved?
We're in the final discussions. I don't have a timeline, but hopefully within the next month.
The good news is, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, the good news is that in working with EPA and FHWA, we know that once we finalize the methodology for the TIP, that will be able to be carried over to the RMAP. So we won't have to kind of recreate the wheel. We can just continue on with that methodology. So some of the time delay on that is going to be beneficial to the RMAP ultimately, because we'll be able to kind of move through that piece at the end of our work a little bit quickly. So we're happy to kind of be sorting those things out. And I'm sure JB's not happy that we're sorting those things out on his project, but we're getting those things ironed out, which will pay off in the long run.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. And was there one more update?
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna kind of take these out of order and ask that we discuss the finance plan first.
Okay.
And then that'll kind of give us the framework for fiscal constraint and then into the project list, since they are buried together.
All right,
So-
so we'll move to item 9, 2055 RMAP finance plan. David Zinda. All right, David, take it away.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, great, thanks. So I don't really have too much to update compared to what we covered last time. Of course, this has been a conversation that has been going on for some time now and has recently revamped, as you are well aware, in recent TPC meetings as well as the RMAP working group. Compared to what I shared last month, probably the biggest change that has happened is that some local jurisdictions among you all have provided some new forecast in terms of their local budget. And so that has kind of altered the bottom line ever so slightly, but everything else, to my knowledge, has mostly remained the same. And so I guess with that, we can go ahead and, oh, I thought, here I thought was a big reveal. But once again, yes, we do have this dollar denomination thing. And so you see these forecasts as you navigate them in the slides. And I think it doesn't look like it was in your packet, but certainly with last time, I typically estimate funds with inflation and then bring them back to a constant dollar basis as you do that project budgeting and selection. So these are the assumptions. Once again, not much has changed here. One thing we did remove was from this competitive grant section, a $70 million high capacity transit. Now, that doesn't mean that money is gone away for that project. It was just based on feedback from ADOT saying that although we could use competitive grants for illustrative funding, as it were, and we can use historical amounts as a reasonable forecast of what we might expect in the future. I think based on their reading of code, and Jeanette can correct me if I'm wrong, or certainly someone from ADOT here, it wasn't maybe necessarily appropriate to assign a competitive grant that had not yet been awarded to a named project. So I think the assumption for that particular one is that that would be funded with RTA Next revenue. But once again, I would defer to Jeanette for any clarity on that. The other thing, like I said, was changed was local budgets, but I'm sorry, is there a question?
Can we ask a question on that now?
Yes, please.
It was my understanding that 70 million would come out of RTA Next, but there is a $70 million federal grant amount for that project. So are you saying that it's not appropriate to assign that to the competitive grants item, but that within the competitive grants line item, there's capacity for that project? Or you just took out the 70 million altogether?
So I think I took out 70 million in addition to that 2.5 amount of actual grant received since 2010. So I'm not as familiar with how projects are ultimately assigned, but at least from my perspective, it seems like that could be a pool of money whereby to identify some project funding for that project. Jeanette, do you have anything to add on there?
Yeah, sure. Mr. Chair, thank you, David. Yeah, so it's assumed that that portion would be coming from that competitive grants line item versus calling it out separate. If we call it out separately, according to the feedback we got from FHWA, we would have to leave the BRT project as what they're calling an illustrative project. Illustrative project. We don't want to do that. We want to include it in the fiscally constrained project list. That way, what we're saying is that, however the mixture of money comes about, whether it's competitive grant, RTA, or any other source, it's part of that 16.2 bottom line. So
thank you. That's helpful. Sorry, David, go ahead.
Great, thank you. So here's a familiar kind of presentation as we did numbers line by line, of course, skipping some years, given that we are growing them at a constant rate of growth. Once again, at least on this federal side, really not much has changed. And on the state and local funding side, again, I would just point to the local budget number that has gone down a little bit. I've noticed that in consulting with these you local jurisdictions, some of the numbers you provided are a little bit slimmer with the exception of maybe one or two. So that kind of took down the bottom line as well. And so the total that we're looking at is about 16.2 billion on a constant 2024 dollar basis. Of course, most of that coming from local sources. Federal sources making up second place, and state would be the lowest with that HERF and Arizona Department of Environmental Quality funding. And so that's really all I have. The big feature was going to be that that bottom line number of 16.2 billion.
Great, thank you, David. Any questions for David on the financial plan? Catherine?
Can we go back up to the tables that show all the local funding? Those are
right there. Yep.
Okay. Is the RTA next on this slide, or where would we see the assumptions for RTA next? Is it the?
So RTA Next is included in this RTA pessimistic forecast. So we assume that the current RTA paradigm or initiate or whatever you want to call it regime ends in 2026. And so from 2027 all the way through 2055, we assume RTA revenue. So this would assume an RTA 3 or next, I guess you could say. And that just comes straight from the Eller Business Research Center forecast.
So it would be like the updated Eller that's more recent, not the first. Okay.
That's correct.
Thanks, David. Other questions, David? Anybody online?
But still pessimistic.
Still pessimistic, that is correct.
Okay, anything else on this item?
No, Mr. Chair, I think that the key takeaway there is that 16.217, and so that is the,
Oh, there's an action on that, right?
yeah, there is an action on that. And I don't know if you want to wait till the end to do the actions, or you can take it now, but that's the key right there, 16.217. So that's the number we're gonna be targeting to fiscally constrain the project list.
I'd prefer to take the action with the item. Does anybody have any concerns or comments or questions on that? Usually there's an action slide.
I mean, I don't know that I have any issue with it. It would be nice to get these spreadsheets with all the numbers because I guess I'm a little unclear. Are we taking the action assumptions and methodology? Or are we saying 16.2 billion? Because without having the numbers provided in advance of the meeting, it's a little bit challenging to take action on the final number.
It's
both.
It's both. I mean, because by recommending the assumptions and methodology, the answer to the question is 16.2. So, and you know.
And so then that becomes the fiscally, that's the fiscal constraint that we're trying to meet with the project list. And correct me if I'm wrong, David or Jeanette, but you've worked with the jurisdictions and these assumptions and coming up with these numbers. So
absolutely.
In addition to this forum, at least I know most of us should have had an opportunity to provide input on this.
Yep. And I believe the first time we brought this to this committee was 2 years ago. So yeah, it's been discussed quite a bit.
Okay.
Can you remind us what the changes from the last meeting to this meeting were? I know you said it was the local funding, but on the tables, is there a change that we could see?
Yeah, sure. David might be able to point it out specifically. It was one jurisdiction's local fund contribution dollar amount. I believe it was actually your jurisdiction. And that was the only change since the last time.
That is correct. And also taking out that 70 million of competitive grant funding.
Okay, because I know that part of the question last time was also on the MOE funding and making sure we weren't double counting it. So I think that the reduction in the local was because it had been counted twice rather than an actual reduction in the funding.
And you provided that feedback to staff?
Yeah, just.
Yes, and I did incorporate your Pima County's new estimates, and I suspect that's why we see a reduced amount as we eliminate double counting. And I did verify MOE on our side of things and where that information was coming from, and that it did come from kind of the expected sources between Pima County, I think Saurita, Oro Valley, South Tucson, and Tucson as well.
Any other questions before I ask for a motion? So this is
The comment, Mr. Chair, like I'm sure we've kicked this dead horse plenty of times and that's all fair and well, but I guess in the intent of what a long range plan is trying to do, which is to identify all of the reasonably anticipated revenues and then put a set of projects together to adhere to that fiscal constraint. I'm still a little troubled that we're using the pessimistic forecast of RTA revenues when Eller themselves noted that the probability of the baseline revenue was far greater than the pessimistic. For planning purposes, I guess I would have hoped that we would be able to see a little bit of a higher constraint value and be able to put a little bit more into the plan. And then we're gonna do this again in 48 months. And so we can take a look at it. The baseline is way off, we can adjust at that point. But I think we're perhaps overly constricting what we can put in the plan. It's not necessarily a promise you'll get exactly these dollars for exactly this project. It is, what do we expect to get? The probability tells us we expect to get the baseline RTA revenue collections, yet we're using the pessimist. So just a comment. I don't want to change it late stage, but
Yeah, I appreciate those comments, Paul, and I think a lot of us are very hopeful that that baseline projection is going to come to bear. I think what would be difficult for PAG staff and even for me as well is that the regional councils made that direction clear that they're going to use the pessimistic revenue projection. I think it would be difficult for us to go against that direction in the plan. I would prefer that we be more conservative, but that direction's been given, and so we have to follow it.
good point.
All right, with that being said, is there a motion to approve the action on the screen here? Anybody want to make that motion? I can't make it.
Motion to approve.
Who was that?
That was Paul Burton.
Thanks, Paul. We've got a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, second from Jose. This would be the time for any discussion on, before we take a vote. Any discussion? All right, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any? All right, hearing none, motion passes.
Mr. Chair?
Did you want to go to item 10 or item 8 next?
We will go to item 8.
Item 8, okay. So we'll move on to item 8, which is 2055 RMAP project list, and it sounds like this will be Jeanette and Hannah.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the TPC. Once again, also thank you to your staff who worked long hours to help us get to this point with the project list. Our last meeting with your teams was Monday last week at the RMAP working group meeting. At that time, there were some comments and feedback that we took, but overall the committee did support us bringing the project list to this committee, subject to a few changes, which we did address. Had a few meetings directly one-on-one with the city's team and the county's team, as well as some conversations with ADOT and Marana, and made those suggested changes from last Monday's meeting. Hannah's gonna pull up the list and share it and kind of walk through some of those changes that are new from the last published version of the list that you might have seen. So pull that up and I'll let Hannah walk us through those.
Okay, so it is showing up on there.
It is small. Can you zoom it or?
Is this the same handout we have as well?
It is, except this one has some comments written on it, so we can just highlight the ones that that we did see some changes.
All right, I think we're good to go. Thank you, Jeanette. Hello, members of the committee. So, yeah, I'm just going to walk through the screen that you're seeing. Just has some highlighted cells. So just going to walk through some changes. I can maybe try and zoom in just a little bit. That are updated from the list that was included in the meeting packet as of Friday. So this list is updated as of Monday. So I'm just going to walk through some key points and then of the in-plan list and the aviation list as well. So the first project that's highlighted is 44.18. So that's the I-10 widening and reconstruct Sunset Road. So this was, the cost of this was reduced from about 257 million to 20 million. Based on conversations with ADOT, so that that cost was reduced, and that was just based on funds that were already programmed. And then moving down, 74.18. This is the I-10 Cortera Road traffic interchange. So this is a multiple sponsor project between ADOT and Marana. Essentially, just combines the Marana project, which had the essentially a duplicate project of the of this one, and the cost was updated from 200 million to 250 million. So That was more of a consolidation exercise. And again, multiple sponsor between ADOT and Marana, and also changed to high priority. So I was updated from the list on Friday. I do want to point out, this was included in the list that was, sent with this, 220.23. This is the roadway rehabilitation and region-wide reconstruction and pavement repair. So based on conversations from, the working group meeting and from our jurisdictional members, that was included at 150 million. But that was reflected in the list in the packet. Down here, all right, and I think the last few were these highlighted near the bottom here, so 1.03, 100.00, and then a new project. So these were additional requests from Pima County. So it's Orange Grove Road, number 4, Oak Road to Skyline Drive, widened to 4-lane roadway. Old Spanish Trail Valencia Road to Camino Loma Alta, widened to 4-lane roadway, and then a new project that will add into the Explorer Country Club Road, I-10 to Valencia. So that was for right-of-way purchase. So these were added to the project list. So the funding amounts are here as well. So for 1.03, it was 48 million. 100 is 64.9 million, and then 5.4 million for the new country club project. And I think though, I'm just going to double check. So those reflect the changes to the project list. As of the list that was sent out Friday, the total cost is about $16 billion. Let's move on briefly to the aviation project. We did have some updates for Pima County. Again, these projects are included separately, so they don't count towards the fiscal constraint. Down. So yes, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there were a couple projects for the Ajo Airport or the Marcus Municipal Airport that were requested to be removed. The projects highlighted in blue were new projects. So these include runway guidance, aircraft rescue and firefighting safety, runway lighting, fuel tanks, lighting and electrical, weather reporting equipment, and terminal development. So those were added to the aviation project list. And there were a couple that were requested to be removed as well. Those were the main changes from the list that was sent out Friday. The reserve project list has been updated. Just there were, again, from the in-plan list, there were a couple additions for Pima County. So those were removed from the reserve project list and moved to the tentatively in-plan list. So happy to take questions or open it up, or Jeanette, if there's anything else that you wanted to.
No, Hannah, I think you covered, all the things that happened since the RMAP working group, and you were here to answer any questions or if you have any recommended changes, now's the time.
Thank you, Hannah. I have a kind of a question to maybe help drive the conversation here. So you said there's 16 billion almost on the dot. We just approved a financial plan for 16.2. What happens to that 200 million?
You get to make a recommendation, Mr. Chair.
Put it in roadway rehabilitation is my recommendation if I had one. I wanted to make sure I understood that there was some capacity in the plan, because I do think that the roadway rehabilitation item is low, especially given that the #1 comment across all surveys was, fix the roads. 150 million over 30 years is only 5 million a year. So I would like to see that category increased. If I make any other comments, I'll open up to the committee. Questions, comments for Hannah? Go ahead, Kathy.
Thank you, Sam. For RTA Next projects that are on this list, did we match the cost estimate between the two plans? Or does this list potentially have more money than what's in RTA?
These should match unless they've been updated since the RTA Next list. And I don't believe there were any. I think the only cost increase we had was a current RTA project for Harrison Road Bridge. So they should be the same. Okay.
I wasn't sure on the Cortero that you said you blended to, because I thought it was around 200 million in the
Yeah.
RTA next, and it looks like it's 250 now.
Haro was a merge of two different projects. I believe the RTA Next contribution is, I think it's showing at 25 million. It's a very small portion of the actual total project cost.
That's the one too that we're going after a grant.
Okay, I wasn't sure if the descriptions of the two match, because it's like 205 million or something in the RTA, and this is 250. So I just didn't know what this is a bigger scope.
This one is the
It's not a
newer.
bigger scope, it's just a newer estimate.
It's just the inflation of the prices, like when we were back, like, when we were looking at Keno Country Club and we did all the cost modeling and the escalation of the prices, when you look at the timeline when this could occur, just based on, right-of-way purchases and environmental, that those prices have gone up. And so when you look at 200 million, could be pretty tight. And so I think that 250 is probably more reasonable. It's probably pretty practical.
That makes me nervous for RTA Next, but I totally get that.
You look at Keno Country Club where we started originally and it ended up at 600 million in the course of not even 2 years. So that's why we went back and we looked at it.
The only other project I didn't see in here, and you made me think of it, and it might be already inclusive enough of this I-10 Country Club Keno. I know the city and county have begun discussing widening Country Club just north of I-10.
Yeah, I was gonna ask what.
But I don't. It's hard to tell, it's not in alphabetical order if that's included in here or not.
Country Club north
It's a
of
very small, I mean, it's like a quarter mile of road, half mile of road, but
I think it's from that Pima County facility, that building.
Right.
Towards I-10.
That's not included, or you don't think it's included?
it doesn't appear to be included, but I'm not sure, because I'm not sure if it would be a little bit in the ADOT project, if it'd be in the city, or if it'd be in the county. It's for multiple.
I think there's a little bit in the ADOT where it ties in, and then I think that right of way between, I guess it would be east and west of Country Club splits between city and county.
Yeah, I would just want to make sure there's enough of a tie back if we need to put it into the tip.
Right.
That it can tie to something here. Okay. And it seems like we have a little bit of cushion in
Right.
terms of money.
So what was the Country Club in I-10 to Valencia? Was that not?
That would go south instead of.
Oh, south, yeah, okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, you're on the other side.
Can I ask just a logistical question? I know that the projects are in order by jurisdiction, but there's a reason why the projects aren't in alphabetical order once you're in that jurisdiction, because it kind of hurt my brain to try to.
Yeah, and if it's easier, we can just do a control find. But we've gone back and forth because I don't know, some people like it in numeric order. That really throws off the apple cart. So yeah, we put them just by jurisdiction. But if there's one in particular, we can do a control find.
I guess maybe for future iterations, if we could have it by jurisdiction and then within the jurisdictions by alphabetical order, that to me, I think would make sense. That's
I agree.
just me. I do have a couple other comments. I'm happy to see that we have a multimodal mobility and safety enhancements item, especially highlighting complete street elements. I would want to at least note that in that item, that pavement is included. A lot of these modernization projects, we are looking for opportunities to also update the pavement at the same time. Sometimes that's required because there's either a lane reduction or lane reconfiguration that requires a pavement to be addressed. And I'm concerned that that item doesn't have enough, doesn't provide enough flexibility to include pavement. That would just be my own. I'm talking 20.18 multimodal mobility and safety enhancements. It's on the second page, about 2/3 of the way down. Just adding some language about pavement.
I have another question on 237.08, the bond debt service, region-wide repayment of regional bonds. It's a pretty significant number at 400 million. Can you let us know how you determined what that number was?
Yeah, this is one that, we've had some ongoing discussion about, we reduced it from the original 520. But we anticipated, some discussion from y'all. And if the recommendation of this committee is to reduce that number, that's perfectly fine. We would suggest not going under 250, but, it's the anticipated recommendation of this committee.
So RTNX is 65 million right now.
Yeah.
What's been allowed? Do we know the remaining amount of debt service for RTA?
Mr. Chair, I believe it's about 15 million.
Okay, so that's 80 million. And then we have 10-ish years more that we need to account for. So if we were just straight lining it, that would be another 40 million. So 120 million seems reasonable. I'm not sure how we would, how the 250 or 400 was landed upon.
400 was just a cut reduction off the original. So
I would suggest 120 million based on the information we have to date on debt service. And in 4 years, when we do it this again, if it needs to grow, it grows. But that's using our nose from today.
That's your recommendation for 20 million.
Reduce 120.
the 120 for item 23708.
Which then would of course free up another, what, 280 million?
So we're at
So that's
400.
just the knowns, there's no cushion or anything, you're just ones with straight knowns?
And the straight line beyond it, extrapolating it another 10 years.
Takes the current bond debt approach and extends it 10 years and handles the remaining in RTA one.
What's the amount in the current ARMA?
520.
But that may have dealt with some of the old,
Per fund is
Her
all I would
funds and
think
stuff.
of.
not quite sure.
It's been carried forward, I think, for quite a few RMAPs.
Since 08.
Wow. And we don't know how much of that 520 was actually.
Oh, we have to go back to like look at how much was actually tied to it, yeah.
Are you having concerns, Heidi, with the reduction?
No, I just wanted to make sure that we're sure that 120 is enough and that we're not shorting ourselves and gonna have to cut a project out because now we need money for debt.
Which wouldn't occur until the next update, right? That's when we would find out. I mean, it's unlikely in the next 5 years, we're gonna blow through 120 million in debt service.
Yeah, I think
Right.
that's fair.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lumpiness of a long range plan.
Uh-huh.
That's good.
Yeah.
So, making those changes, then that's 480 on the table to redistribute through the project list. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, there are additional cuts if we're looking for more funding to put more projects in. We made some recommendations to PAG staff and I don't know if there's a need there necessarily or not, but a couple that we identified were 55608, the bicycle facilities region wide. That's a $400 million amount currently. In consultation internally and with your staff, Mr. Chair, we felt that could easily be reduced to 300 million if we want to squeeze another 100 million for other things. I think it gives us enough cushion that we're not going to spend $300 million on bicycle facility connections over the next 4 years. If we find we're way off pace and we should put more money in there, we can do that. So that's an option there. Another one was cleaning up the transportation planning and program content. So there's a project 659.03, which is region-wide studies, I believe. And then there's also internal PAG 139.98, which is regional transportation planning. There may be an opportunity to consolidate those if we wanted to squeeze $30 million out of that. I don't think, it may not be absolutely necessary, but I went in laser focused trying to get free up more funding within the heavily constrained, fiscal constraint number. And so these are the ones that I came up with. And then the last one is 202.98 bridge rehab region wide. I think it's currently $250 million, which is not necessarily representative of all the regional bridge rehab needs anyway. So if we wanted to further reduce that, we could probably take 50 million out of that, have it be $200 million. At 200 million or 250, it still doesn't represent all of the bridge rehab needs either way. So those are some options if we wanted to make more funding available and put more projects to reassign.
So can I ask if the 250, if you don't think that it actually would address all the needs that we need, why would you reduce it?
If we need to put it somewhere else, because in either condition, we're not addressing all of the needs. So 250 and 200, there's not much difference in that. It doesn't represent the totality of
Right,
bridge
but I would
needs.
think that bridge repair versus say a mill and fill
That's a good point, yes.
might have a little more weight to it.
It may be better for us to try to identify as much as possible in bridge rehab. That may be an approach we want to take. I think the number is probably on the order of 3 or 4 times short of what the actual needs may be. So it would take quite a bit to fund the total needs for bridge rehab.
I agree. That's why I don't think we should reduce that one.
That's a good point.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
On that one, 202.98. So that number is representative of some conversations we had with one-on-one jurisdictions who decided to take some of their named projects out and not call them named projects, but roll them into that categorical. So staff's not really comfortable reducing that number at this time.
That seems totally fair. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of project list movement going on right now. What is the timeline? Do we have to approve this today in order to reach the needed approval by regional council, or do we have any cushion in today's? I know this is an action item. But I'm getting nervous about being able to feel like we all know what we're acting upon when there's all the movement.
I would agree, maybe before the staff answers, there's a lot of movement. I'm like trying to write down slash this, slash that. I would feel uncomfortable approving a plan until we can see these changes at least reflected in the project list that we're approving. I mean, I think that otherwise we're sort of just conditionally approving it based on the changes we've roughly discussed, and having, nearly $500 million on the table. I feel like the working group should probably make some recommendations, because there's probably projects that didn't make it in the fiscally constrained plan that maybe we want to relook at, or how do we redistribute that through the categoricals based on some of the input we got from the survey. So I was going to ask that same question. So thoughts?
The purposes in modeling moving forward and getting to regional council in May, we really need it to be approved sooner than later. That's why we're asking for it to be approved today, and why we kind of hustled over the past month to work with each jurisdiction one-on-one multiple times. We can make some of the changes in the Excel spreadsheet before we leave. We can do that on the fly and show that to you before we go, and then distribute any remaining categorical funding. We can do that after the fact, as long as we're fine with the actual named projects, so that the modeling team can move forward. We don't believe that we've left any named projects off the list that anybody felt strongly about. In fact, we've been able to add those as late last week. We were making room for those. So with just the verification that we can get that piece of country club in there, if it's not already reflected in one of the projects, I mean, that would be the only adjustment that we're hearing now.
On that note, I think it's probably might fit into 13.23, which is South Country Club Road. It looks like it goes I-10 south.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you want to adjust that to include that little
chunk to the north.
To the north.
Okay.
Yeah. Just to keep it. So thanks, Jeanette. So really what it is, we need to know if there's any other named projects. I mean, that's what we need to get nailed down. So the modeling forward.
That's right.
movement of money within the plan amongst the categoricals could still be in flux beyond today.
It can, yeah. And I mean, I think part of the reason Hannah and I left a little bit of a cushion in there without programming up to the last dollar was for that feedback from this committee and then obviously from any additional outreach that we conduct. There were, another discussion about reducing the bike ped. We wouldn't recommend that either. I mean, we're in the middle of doing a regional active transportation plan, and we know many of the jurisdictions have laundry lists of projects that would fall in that category. So we believe that some of the categories are funded pretty healthy at healthy levels. There's others that you can make a claim that should have some more additional funding. I think the roadway reconstruction's a prime example of that. And those are the recommendations that Hannah and I are looking to you all at this committee to make. We worked really closely with your teams to make sure all the little nuances of those different types of projects, specifically like the complete streets projects, the bridge improvements, that all the different varieties of projects could be covered in the categories. I know there was some pretty in-depth discussion specifically with Suntran because they had pretty well identified needs. So we believe those are covered as well.
Okay. So with that being said, I guess I'll look to the committee to ask, are there any named projects you feel did not make it into the in-plan list that, given some additional capacity, would move plan? I do agree with Jeanette. I think that's important that we nail that down so they can do the work they need to do. I don't know that waiting for the next month's meeting is gonna it's gonna put them in a bind.
Mr. Chair, and that was kind of the original exercise. We knew we needed to add something in the range of $400 million of projects, and you guys were bringing new projects. And so your staff and I kind of put heads together and said, we can shave this, we can move things around, found all of that capacity and more. So there is that and more. And the question is, right, are there other things that should move in plan so that Hinsu and his team can get to work?
And I assume that work has been done at the working plan level. So I know that I feel comfortable with our in-plan list. I checked with our folks before today. I know we don't have any others we would add. I think now would be the time to let us know. Otherwise, I think we should try to take some action today.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
This is Nalo with the town of Sarita. I don't really have a question, but I just want to confirm that we have project 27 on the list.
That's 27.
Campbell Avenue.
Yes.
Perfect. Cool. Thank you.
Can I just ask, does that cover the part that is the federal earmark that?
Yes.
That's critical.
That's correct.
All right, thanks. Good question.
Thank you.
So I think what y'all are thinking and looking at the list, really what I heard is a general consensus to reduce the bond debt service from 400 to 120. And then I had just made a statement at the beginning of this to increase the roadway rehabilitation, region-wide construction and pavement repair. I know we talked generally about some other reductions, increases, but nothing that was really seemed like it stuck. Those were the two to me that stuck out in our conversation. Are there any other movement of dollars amongst the categoricals that anyone feels strongly about that we can resolve today? And then if anybody has a suggestion on the amount to move into the roadway rehabilitation region-wide.
I would take it from the bond and put it into that.
Into there.
That's the free money right now.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Say that again, sorry.
So take the reduction, the amount that we reduced the bond item and put it right into the roadway. So take the 280 and add it to 150.
Mr. Chair, will the 237 from the sunset portion that's already been program been completed also be applied to that?
That's already reflected in the 16,009.
Oh, it's in the 16-0. Okay.
So then that still leaves just that $200 million buffer, which what happens to that? If no action's taken on that buffer, it
Just remains,
remains
yep.
as a.
Mhm. And similarly to the tip, you don't have to plan all the way to the dollar amount. We certainly try to get as close as we can, but there's no, sure, you don't have to get down to the penny. But,
So I like Heidi's idea, just move that straight movement of money, brings pavement up to 430. Any other changes you all would like to see today?
Quick question about that project. In previous RMAPs, as far back as I can recall, that portion also had the local investments, the local revenue investments into pavement rehab. So the number looked, healthier. And I think it was north of $2 billion. And in this approach, I'm not real clear how or where the local revenues are going to be shown, because they're not really reflected in the projects list. They're just going to be in a narrative. Is that how it's going to work?
they're gonna be.
I guess I'm trying to be responsive to that public input that says, hey, fix the roads. If it makes more sense to continue the way we've done it in the past and show the regional available revenues and the local investment that we anticipate to put on pavement and show a pretty healthy figure, maybe we should have a discussion about doing it that way rather than changing it if it's not broken.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, as we've discussed numerous times with the working group, the way we're gonna identify pavement is separate from the in-plan project list, and that is because the magnitude of the dollars that are coming from local dollars to be spent on local pavement. That number, those dollars are not part of fiscal constraint, and so we wanted to make a concerted effort to show them separately. They're not omitted from the long range plan. They're gonna be a major piece of the plan, most likely in the finance plan itself, so that we're showing all the complete pot of local dollars that are going to be spent on local maintenance. And rather than tangling that with the fiscally constrained list where, that's not really going to show the true magnitude of the impact, we are going to pull that out separately and kind of highlight it on its own. So that, in conjunction with the 430 that it sounds like you guys are gonna recommend for the reconstruction, I think that'll show quite a contribution towards roadway repair that isn't covered in name projects, which are, as we know, gonna cover a lot of reconstruction as well. So I think it'll be crystal clear in the plan how much money is gonna be spent and the magnitude of that investment.
Thank you, Jeanette. Back on our earlier conversation about outreach, this plan will go out to the public for feedback. We approved the list today. It gives you all the chance to start the modeling on the named projects. If there's anything that comes up in that public outreach, what's our ability to tweak this before it's approved?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, Mr. Chair. So the remainder of the public outreach is a little bit different than what we've typically done. So the next piece of it is going to be where we do that direct outreach to specific groups, which typically hasn't really happened in the past. Really, all that's required is just our 30-day public comment period. But knowing that there are groups of people that we want to go out to beyond just opening up for 30-day public comment, seemed like that would be the more critical step in the public outreach. So we're going to start that right here out of the gate. Like now, I look at everybody like, we're doing it now, go ahead. But so that'll be the next piece. So then, of course, anything that comes out of that, all that's going to be rolled into the final plan, but will be presented to this committee. If there's something that we're noticing is an omission, where folks are uncomfortable with something, or there seems to be a piece that's that needs to change, or maybe it's a project description or an element that should be added, we'll bring that back to this committee for sure. And of course, those recommendations will be, folded into the draft plan that we bring forward to the committee. If we see a need to make an adjustment in terms of like adding a category or really drastically shifting a large amount of dollars around, then we'll bring that to this committee. But we anticipate a few more meetings with the working group as we move through the modeling phases. Also with Pop Tech, that's kind of the main committee. But before we bring anything back necessarily through TPC, it'll go there. We're also going to be providing regular updates at management and regional council, moving towards that target of May approval. So, if we start to see some things, those will be brought, to your attention and to the rest of the committees as well. So.
Great. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So here's what I have as all the changes that we discussed. And so anybody can correct me if I'm wrong here. Reducing the debt service to 120, increasing the roadway rehab to 430, adding some language around pavement for project 20.18 around the multimodal projects. We decided to leave bridge improvements alone. And then on the, I think it's the second to last page, is the project 13.23, adding some language about extending Country Club north of I-10. Did I miss anything?
And we'll verify that distance with your team.
Yes, please do. Okay, so with that, this is an action item. I think unless there's any other questions or comments for the team, now would be an appropriate time to ask for a motion to approve this project list based on those changes.
Mr. Chair, this is Nalo with the town of Sarita. I'd like to make a motion to approve with the changes.
All right, thank you, Nala. Is there a second? Jose seconded. Is there any discussion before we call for the vote? All right, anybody from online? Or, whoops, Heidi just walked in. So Heidi, we have this motion and a second to approve the project list with a few changes. Reducing the debt service to 120, increasing roadway to 430, adding some language about pavement for project 20.18, leaving the bridge improvement item the same, and extending Country Club, the South Country Club project north of I-10 to capture that little piece. There was a motion and a second to approve the project list with those changes. Yep, no problem. Any other discussion on the item?
These changes are going to be forwarded to us, yeah.
Yes, Mr. Chair, at the conclusion of this meeting, we'll update the project list and make sure that it's sent to this group as well as the working group.
Great, thank you, good question. All right, hearing no other discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
All right, that leaves us with item 10, 2055 RMAP performance targets, and Jeanette and Hannah.
Yes,
All
Mr.
right.
Chair, thank you. Thank you, members of the TPC. So there were two items put in the packet. One was just the TIP report, the performance report that came out of the TIP, and that was really just to kind of give you guys an idea of where we stood on the most recent run of the performance report. What we're asking of this committee today is to recommend approval of the performance targets. So that's all we're really talking about are those targets. We had a few discussions at the RMAP working group. They recommended continuation of the existing targets, and really all that means is that instead of moving the goalposts, if you will, we're going to continue to leave our targets where they are and track towards those. We did include some slides in that in the TPC packet as well that was the information that was presented at the working group. So Hannah has those available, and we can kind of walk you through the request.
All right, thank you, Jeanette. Mr. Chair, CSO. There we go. Yeah, so I'm just going to provide a brief update of those performance measures and recommended targets that are part of the 2055 RMAP development. Just as a reminder, the RMAP is required to be a performance-based plan. The original framework for the performance measures and targets was developed as part of the 2055 RMAP and adopted by Regional Council in 2016. The first performance report that showed progress towards these targets was included in the 2045 RMAP update, which was adopted in 2020. So these targets are tracked using 2015 baseline data. As Jeanette mentioned, we were discussed at the working group meeting. So my presentation will be fairly brief, but again, there was that detailed information included in the packet. So the first the category of performance measures is system maintenance. So this tracks 3 performance measures and associated targets. So just have this table set up. The performance measures are on the far left. The adopted 2055 target is just right next to there. The proposed 2055 target is just to the right of there. And then there's notes just showing some helpful information and then where we are meeting those targets. So again, essentially the recommendation would be to extend the targets from 2045 to 2055 for pretty much everything that I'll discuss today. So for these ones, you can see we're slightly behind pace on transit fleet, on pace for bridges, and on pace for pavement conditions. So the recommendation is to extend these targets just for kind of illustrative purposes. There is a chart here that was taken directly from that TIP performance assessment for public bridges, which we are on pace for to meet that target. And then safety is the next category. So there are a number of safety performance measures that we track. These include fatalities, injuries, and transit crashes. Unfortunately, generally, we are moving in the wrong direction to meeting those 2040 adopted 2045 targets. We're either trending away or behind pace. There are a few that are on pace, such as transit crash rate and some of those serious injuries performance measures. But the recommendation would be to extend the target from 2045 to 2055 for these measures. And there was some discussion of the working group on these specifically. And again, just kind of as examples here, just a few graphs from the draft performance assessment in the TIP document showing fatalities and that we are trending away from those measures. Or those targets, excuse me. The next category is multimodal choices. So this has to deal with walking, biking, transit, other forms of transportation other than personal vehicles. So we are more or less on pace for meeting these targets. So the recommendation is to extend the targets for 2045 to 2055. Specifically the bicycle and pedestrian facility miles. Those are based on the 2045 pace of 24 miles a year. And again, just a few graphs here, just kind of showing where we're at with some of these, meeting some of these targets, again, taken from the performance assessment in the TIP document. All right, the next category is system performance. So this deals with travel time and congestion. So for these, there's four that we track. So the recommendation is to extend these targets again from 2045 to 2055. An example shown here in the graph of the daily vehicle miles traveled per capita. And I'm moving through these pretty quick, but the next is environmental stewardship. So this has to do with air quality, so greenhouse gas emissions, carbon emissions, PM10 and PM 2.5 emissions. So the recommendation for, I'll go through a couple, is more or less to extend the adopted 2045 target. The PM10 and PM 2.5, the adopted target was to maintain current levels. The proposed 2055 target essentially just provides a little more clarity showing what those current levels are. So for the weekday metric tons of PM10 emissions, that would be to maintain less than 1.5 metric tons per weekday. And for PM 2.5, it's to maintain less than 0.5 metric tons per weekday. So you can see the notes in there. Again, that just provides some additional clarity. The honored greenhouse gas emissions, that would be total in million metric tons on roadways.
I have a question about the 2.5. I'm just looking at the sheet that you have that provides the additional information, and I'm curious why the PM 2.5 number would go up from the numbers we're seeing to. Why would we? It's 0.5 and what we're seeing is 0.35.
So the target would be to maintain less than 0.5.
But the performance data right now is at 0.35. So why would that increase?
For that specifically.
We just had the standard lowered on that. So it's important that we not backslide.
Okay.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so. So would your maybe the recommendation would be to have that lowered?
Yeah. Yeah, it shouldn't get worse. We shouldn't allow it to get worse. That's what I'm saying. And right now, as of 2023, you have the performance data at 0.35 and your target is 0.5.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, go for it.
Dustin, I think had some explanation on that.
Go ahead, Dustin.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I believe that probably in the past, the emissions models changed from moves 2014B or possibly moves 3 to moves 4. And with each iteration of that model change, the emissions outputs change as well. So this was the number that came out with the current emission model runs, the most recent being at 0.5. And with the federal standard being lowered recently from 12 to 9 and our region being at 6, it still should be adequate to protect and maintain at the current modeled levels, if that makes sense.
Did that answer your question, Adeline?
Yeah, I mean, I understand there's changes in the model, but I still don't really agree that we should be going up from where we are today. So if you want to provide different numbers, that's what I'm saying. So I don't agree that we should be backsliding. And if you can show me the difference in the model numbers, then maybe I'll understand it better, but I'm going off of the information you're giving us.
So your recommendation is to keep the current target, not change it?
Yes.
Is there any concern with that?
Yep. Do you have any concern with that, Dustin?
The only concern would be that our modeled outputs would show 0.5, while the 0.35 was based on previous model outputs with a prior iteration of the air quality modeling. So the 0.5 is an update of what the output from the air quality model is currently. The 0.35 was reflective of what the prior iteration was. It takes into account, the latest factors for vehicle emissions with the PM 2.5. I'm sure that comes from brake, tire, and exhaust that's modeled. So other pollutants change too, the values of NOx, CO, VOCs. They change when regulations pass that affect the future predicted current emissions. So that's why this number was chosen, and it would be reflective of what's currently being modeled. And the connection to what's modeled at the air quality monitor is a different topic, but yeah, we're modeling it. We're monitoring at 6. The standard was just lowered from 12 to 9. So there's still quite a protective factor built into maintaining this level in our view.
Thank you. You want to keep going?
Sure. All right, no, thanks for the question, and thank you, Dustin. All right, so I think I covered everything on this slide. So again, just a couple, moving on, just a couple graphs taken from the performance assessment related to this category. Again, we're on pace for both of these items. All right, the next category is land use and transportation. So this really deals with job accessibility for various modes. As you can see on the notes column, we are currently behind pace for achieving these targets, but the recommendation would be to extend the targets for all of these measures from 2045 to 2055. And again, there's just the graph here for job accessibility index for all modes, which again, we are behind pace on reaching. All right, and the last category is freight and economic growth. So there are 3 performance measures in this category. Not all of the, actually none of them had an adopted 2045 target. However, for the first one, so the total freight delay, there's a recommendation to have a target for 2055. So that's to maintain 95% freight reliability in the interstate and 90% on the non-interstate NHS. And so this, we do have data related to this from the Fast Track performance measures that we track, so that so we could add a 2055 target for that performance measure based on that data. And then the other 2, total freight share and total freight tonnage, there's no recommendation to have a target for those 2 performance measures. And they did not have one for the 2045. All right, so I know I went through all that pretty quick, but that wraps up my the presentation. Again, the ask is to recommend approval of the targets for the 2055 RMAP, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Hannah. What was this reviewed and discussed with the working group?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to leave here. So I'll ask one question and run. I'm just curious, similar to when we looked at the public input, you know, that was to inform, how do these performance measures, I know they're a requirement for an RMAP for a long range plan, but how does it inform or affect what that project list is? Especially, you know, the safety, we are not on track for any of the safety measures practically. And so how are we picking projects that may help us achieve our targets rather than just reporting a target?
Sure. So where it starts is that, you know, all the performance information is made available to the jurisdictions when you guys are putting your projects in the RMAP. So all that's available, and we can go and see, you know, are these projects going to move the needle in certain areas? It's not an exact science because, you know, we can only analyze what information is put in there. So we're assuming that if you guys put a project in, that you're going to be addressing all the areas where the performance may or may not be failing, right? So we're assuming, okay, there's safety issues there. You're going to address those when you put your project in. We don't necessarily know that for a fact, right? Because projects aren't completely scoped out. So we did make some recommendations specifically in categoricals to address. I know safety was one of them. We recommended quite a big increase in that categorical. Will that move the needle? It's $1 million question, right? We sure hope so. We sure hope that if we invest money in those areas, it moves the needle. But if those projects aren't delivered and those dollars aren't spent, then, you know, it's not going to move the needle. So, you know, it's hard, right? But we do provide that information. We do know that a lot of the projects that are identified and brought forward to the group do have an impact, and that's, you know, what the data science team is going to do next is look at, you know, to what extent are we going to move the needle, or could we move the needle? Should we deliver 30 years worth of these projects? So yeah, it's not used specifically in project selection, meaning we don't go in and say, okay, our number one problem is pavement condition. Let's just go off the top and select all the projects that have failing pavement. I mean, that would miss the mark drastically probably on the needs that you guys bring forward as individual jurisdictions, but the information is there to help analyze the magnitude of what could be, should we be able to deliver all these projects, but yeah, we see the trends, and one of the reasons, you know, we had this conversation with the working group on changing these targets or extending these targets. And, you know, one of the reasons we said, let's extend them is because, you know, we've been looking at these things for about 8 years. And the idea is to see like the long term, are we going to move the needle? Can we move the needle? And so to sort of change that goalpost, if you will, midstream just seemed kind of disingenuous. And we've seen some places do that where he said, okay, well, we're not trending towards achieving that performance measure, so maybe we're going to just lower the bar for ourselves. That kind of defeats the whole purpose. At least we thought so. And so did the working group. So that was kind of the concept here, is like, let's just continue to look at, you know, how we're trending, see the impacts over the next cycle, specifically as the tip is, you know, realized and those projects are developed, and also in seeing that there are specific investments right now being made by jurisdictions, especially in safety, right? You guys have your safety plan. I know there's big elements in the 411 work that the city is doing. And so we see the investments kind of sitting there waiting to be had. And hopefully by the next round, we'll see some of those projects move the needle.
Well, and I think it's great we have healthy funding in those categoricals and the project list.
Yeah.
You know, that allows us hopefully to be more reactive to the needs as they emerge.
And, you know, we operate under the philosophy, at least here at PAG, that you guys aren't putting projects out there that are gonna exasperate problems, right? That things are gonna be addressed as investments are made. Certainly there's factors beyond the infrastructure, right, that play into some of these things. And hopefully as a community, we can look beyond just our transportation investments and how do we address some of these bigger issues. But we don't think that any of the projects that you're doing are gonna, you know, are gonna make it worse, right? So.
You're leaving?
Yeah, I'm leaving.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul will stay.
All right, thanks, Catherine.
Thanks, Catherine.
Natalie?
To follow up on that, specifically with the greenhouse gas emissions is the one that I'm most concerned about, and I think it is something that we all need to be very concerned about. So if we go through the modeling, you know, and we see that we aren't going, you know, maybe we'll see that it increases. Because we will have information, we'll have pretty detailed information for the modeling on that particular metric. So is that something that we can then address? Can we look at that and go, you know, I mean, I think we'd have to do it collectively with the jurisdictions, right? To see what types of projects are contributing to that and what kind of changes we might need to make. I mean, that's the only way that we're gonna actually make a dent in greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation system.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, there's significant new investments in the in-plan list that are geared right towards that, right? With our EV charging and other infrastructure improvements, transit investments, bike and ped investments, and hopefully those things will help influence that and move the needle for, you know, for greenhouse gas. Like Dustin can speak to more of the, you know, what we're seeing region wide. I mean, we're obviously focused, maybe hyper focused on our PM10 because that's our non-attainment area, right? So we've been working with our partners to make sure that, you know, we're tracking those impacts. But yeah, I mean, there's any number of measures that, you know, ideally we'll see what the outcomes show when we run the model. If we did see the needle, you know, just take off, and yeah, we'd have to really come back and hone in on that. But I mean, overall with the advancements in technology, we do think that, you know, we're going to see some changes, and hopefully those investments continue to move the needle, not just on the region level, but we're seeing, you know, at the state level and federal level, a lot of investment being made. So. Yeah.
So this is an action item.
It is.
Right? Is there an action item slide? Or are we just approving?
Yeah, it's up there. There's. Do it. That's what you put to it.
There we go. All right.
Thank you.
So after we approve or not these performance targets, what's the next step?
The next step is that, you know, now that we have the list, we can run the performance report and bring it back to this group. That comes after the modeling phase, just,
got
it won't be like next month.
Thanks, Jim. So this is an action item. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to approve the performance targets as provided by Hannah.
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
Great.
Thank you very much. I think that was the last of the RMAP items. We will now move back to item 5, regional transportation revenues update. James Tao.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you'll turn to table 3 and figure 1 of your regional transportation revenues report. Through June, it's about 186 million in HERF and DLT collected across the region. Of that 186 million, TAG collected about 31.5 million, or about 17% of that regional funding. The remainder was distributed directly to our jurisdictional partners. Regional HERF revenues were at a nearly 4% increase year over year. Over the 5-year average, we stood at just over 12%. Table 4 shows from 12/6 in detail. Through June, we collected $31.5 million, which is 14.7% more than the ADOT official forecast and nearly 9% stronger than last year. Table 5 shows HERF 2/6 with stronger than expected collections totaling 7.1 million through June, which is 10% stronger than last year. And with table 6 through June, PAG had just over 98.4 million in an interest-bearing account. Most of those dollars are spoken for. In table 7, we look at the city and town HERF distributions year to date. Table 8 shows the HERF 12/6 and 2/6 we have already seen. Additionally, we have Pima County HERF and Pima County vehicle license tax, the portion set aside for transportation use only. And table 9 has the previous 5 years and lets you see how much HERF your town or city received. Table 10 shows us gallons of gas sold in Pima County through various fiscal years. We normally like to see about 13%, and through June, we were just under 13% for the fiscal year. And in table 11, about $123 million has been collected in TPT through June, for nearly 3.5% gain over the adopted budget. That also mimics the percent rise over last year's actuals, about 3.5%. Mr. Chair, that concludes my update.
Thank you very much, James. Any question for James on the revenue data? All right, hearing none, we will go on to item 6, update on the regional active transportation plan. Hannah?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. So for this item, I'm just going to provide a brief verbal update on the PAG Regional Active Transportation Plan, or RATP, that is under development. So just for a little context, and as a reminder, so in January of this year, the PAG Regional Council approved a contract with Kimley Horn to develop the RATP. The PAG staff has been working closely with the consultant on plan development. Currently, the consultant has completed the data collection, including data provided by the by Copia AI as part of the orthophoto feature extraction project, and is currently in the analysis phase. So this includes level of traffic stress analysis, equity and public health analysis, and connectivity analysis. So the first phase of public involvement is underway and includes an interactive map where participants can actually identify areas in the transportation network where there's either challenges with active transportation treatments, maybe that's a barrier or an unsafe crossing, something like that. But they can also identify areas with good active transportation treatments and that they might like to see more of. So that is open to the community. There's also a survey which is embedded with the map where participants can provide feedback on the draft goals, as well as they can rank potential active transportation treatments. The survey is pretty brief because it is in conjunction with that interactive map. The consultant is also working with local businesses to promote the map and survey, such as kind of shops that are more geared towards running, walking, biking, and other outdoor businesses as well. So 3 in-person events have been held to get public feedback. So these included July, there was a summer road race series at Reed Park. There was also on the 12th of this month, so August 12th, there was a Meet Via Maynard's event downtown, as well as just this past Saturday, a 5K run of the Breeze in the Trees in Sarita. There is one more event scheduled towards the end of the month. That is the Fuga Bicycle event at the El Pueblo Center in Irvington. So the in-person events are spread out in different areas of the community to try and aim for diverse participation. The map and survey will close on September 6th, and it's available on the PAG website. So I know we sent a link that was emailed to TPC members, but any help in promoting the survey would be appreciated. Make sure to take it yourself as well. And then the RATP working group, which was developed kind of at the start of the plan development process, is tentatively scheduled to meet next month. The consultant anticipates sharing results from the technical analysis and public outreach results as well. The working group is scheduled to meet 4 times throughout the project, and they've had 1 meeting so far, which was in April. We also anticipate a more detailed update and presentation by the consultant at the TPC meeting next month. So this concludes my update. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks so much, Hannah. Any questions for Hannah on this project?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just a little curious with having your working group meet 4 times. The next one will be discussing the results of the survey, but there seems to be a lot of work yet to be done to get from the gap analysis to the selection or identification of projects. So is that going to be done outside the working group, or how do you envision that taking place in terms of, will that just be providing that content to the jurisdictions to say, here are the gaps, let us know what your project list looks like, or will there be a facilitation by your consultant to kind of work through some sort of approach or prioritization process to say, you know, these types of gaps might be, you know, a higher priority because of the connection restrictions from one area to another. I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around how we should prepare to get to the final destination of projects lists related to this plan.
Sure, yeah. No, thank you for the question. So yeah, that technical analysis that will be shared with the working group. So we'll be working closely with the working group on feedback to look at, you know, the results and project selection as well.
So the working group will have 2 meetings to kind of flesh that all out.
I'd have to double check the schedule, but yeah, there are 2 more working group meetings after the one anticipated in September.
I guess that just makes me a little nervous only because I feel like there's quite a distance to get to from, you know, public feedback to identification of gaps and determination of what projects are appropriate. That's going to take a lot of work. So I want to try to prepare our staff internally for thinking through that process and what's going to need to go into that, because the further we can see that coming, the better prepared we'll be to start that thought process and figure out how to use the gap, you know, facility inventory stuff to help us determine what projects might be appropriate. So maybe we can chat offline and see if your consultant team has any thoughts on how to best facilitate that process. I don't want to just have it dumped on the working group. Here's an assignment for you, come back, you know, in a month or a month and a half with your projects list, because we might see that might be difficult.
Thanks, Paul.
Good. Mr. Chair. It's really interesting project too, because this is like folded into the COPIA project effort. And so we are doing a really extensive QA/QC on the gaps right now. You know, Mead had put out an ask, I want to say a month ago, it might not have been that long ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, to different jurisdictions to participate in that QA/QC process. I know Oral Valley has been really active in it, to get in there and kind of look and look at the data, look what's coming out and see if it's accurate and help guide the consultant team there. So there might be some more efforts where we're asking specific people to, hey, dive in there and make sure that like what the results are coming out, what's being shown is what, you know, is sort of ground truth, if you will, by the folks that are operating these facilities. So because those 2 projects overlap, there is that opportunity to do a lot of QA/QC kind of in conjunction with one another. So be on the lookout for those asks. I know she's been working with the GIS working group folks and planning folks. So we'll see a lot of kind of, we don't want to duplicate the efforts, but if they overlap at all, to make sure that we're making best use of everybody's time, we'll be doing that.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I think it's going to be great content. I'm just concerned how we'll be able to use it, just considering staff limitations and such. And then have you guys given thought to moving forward, how that's going to be maintained? Will it be part of the bikeways map or some sort of process where you try to gather the most recent years implementation of, Oro Valley built these sidewalk sections or whatever project infill?
Yeah, there'll be definitely effort to like maintain the data layers or the GIS layers as we move forward with new projects. So yeah, a lot of that does happen at the bike map, but that doesn't, the bike map doesn't like, it doesn't really the gaps with it. So yeah, hopefully we'll be able to sort of watch the evolution of that as those investments are made.
Any other questions? All right, hearing none, we'll go to item 11, future agenda items. Does anybody have any future agenda items they'd like to request? All right, hearing none, we'll go to item 12, adjournment. Thank you all for your work today. Have a great rest of your week. Meeting stands adjourned.
Thanks to